Hello everyone, welcome back to Dennis Saliba Occult Forteana. It has been quite a while, and all I just wanted to say is welcome back everyone. I hope you're all doing well. In today's stream, we're going to be talking about part 2 of Lao ritual death and funerary practices and their associated rituals, and this is part 2. I do apologize for the previous stream because I didn't realize that the original article would take as long as it would to cover, so this is why I've split it into 2. Having said that, let's get right into today's article, which is Laos, Ritual of Death in Western Urban in memory of Mrs. Lang Luang Hot. Mrs. Lang Luang Hot. There she is there. R.I.P. R.I.P. But this particular article does describe a lot of the symbolism in quite a lot of detail and a lot of the hidden meanings in many of the practices within Lao traditions. The beloved and revered Anma of her 7 daughters and 2 sons, her 19 grandchildren, dang, that's a pretty big family, and her 14 great-grandchildren and her large family all over the world, Vientiane, Laos, 1920, Portland, USA, 2018. Introduction. When Alexandra Henry Mohut, a young French naturalist and adventurer, arrived in Luang Prabang during the December of 1860, he didn't know that he was coming to the end of his journey and would be buried in terra incognita, very far away from his native town of Montélimad in France. Again, pardon my French, I don't speak French fluently. I'm just guessing the pronunciation there. He was only 35 years old when he was struck by yellow fever on the November 10th, 1861. For sure, he didn't even doubt that a century and a half later, hundreds of thousands of people from Nachach La Nesang, his last home, would take the opposite route to live, to die, and to be buried in the West, either in the US, France, Canada, Australia, or other Western countries far away from their native land. Because after all, the French conquered the Indo-Chinese mainland, as they called it back then, Indochina, which is Vietnam, parts of Laos, parts of Cambodia, way back. Like the giant creepers of the legend of the Lao country, Alexandra Henry Mohut, who became famous worldwide after his rediscovery of the ruins of Angkor Wat, had just connected 2 unknown worlds, and opened a path that would never be deserted by long-haul travelers, whether they are voluntary or forced by fate and socio-political leanings. And since his last death, Henry Mohut's grave, situated not far away from the former royal capital, has been maintained and respected by French explorers Commander Daudat de la Grille in May 1867 and Auguste Pavie in 1887, and authorities Ambassador to Laos Daniel Dupont, wow, and the city of Montélimad in 1990. For Lao Buddhists, the grave, or Ta'at Kaduk Stupa, or I think I've read half of this before, deserves respect, regular visitors, and maintenance because it is a living entity and an artificial corpse or a cosmos in miniature. Besides, death is not perceived as an irredeemable loss or a definitive departure by Lao Buddhists. Not surprising, because they practice the Vada Buddhism, but as a simple transition between a physical state which then disappears in an immaterial existence, impalpable but very real indeed, which can manifest in its presence in various ways. I had watched with loving emotion and tenderness the visit of bees to my wife on her first birthday. Since the death of her beloved mother, strangely, she, who was a holy horror of insects and bees in particular, showed no anxiety, no fear, and continued to wash vegetables while quietly explaining this unusual presence in the kitchen with these words, because they love me. When I tried to help her expel the bees, one of them landed on my forearm before flying away. If someone pushes bees' nest in the ventilation holes of doors and windows, I've not seen them sit. So stealing, no buzzing in front of that kitchen. The dead has gone but doesn't disappear, wrote John C. Holt, referring to Buddhists in Sri Lanka. Patrice Ludwig and Paul Williams share this opinion. As death, the configuration disappears to give room for another structure. The dead could be all around us, but they are no longer ours. Hello to X. Good to see you on board. How are you doing, man? Good to see you. A society is not only composed of the living, but also of the dead, said Daniel D. Copper. According to Michel Henry Dufour, the dead, which seems so definitive, is nothing but an interruption, or rather a reorientation of the current incessant life. The funeral does not constitute a permanent separation from deceased with his family, despite symbolic acts of separation. Similarly, a Chinese marriage symbolizes the separation of a woman from her birthplace. But this separation is only one step in the cycle of separations, reunion, stress. Charles Stafford. He has there's another citation there. And for your Jiro Takita, death is a kind of entrance. To die does not mean that we have arrived at the end. Death is just a door with a guardian to a long way, and that the travelers will return to this entrance, explained in the Japanese director in his films Departures, or Ukuri Bito in Japanese. Convinced that the deceased remains in the heart and in the love of his loved ones in a very concrete way, Lao Buddhists overseas have a rather detached and respectful behavior to death. Even if sadness and sorrow are immeasurable as in all other cultures, but they live in a restrained, discreet way, resides in the unsaid, in the gestures, and expresses itself, especially by the solidarity and the mutual community aid. No crying or pains. I'm good, went to another town today. That sounds pretty cool. That sounds quite awesome, quite dope. Which was my grandma's house on my mum's side. On one of my aunts yelled at a cousin of mine to get S out of my grandma's house. I wonder why. What drives such behaviors to X? What drives such behaviors? One verse of the Dhamma Scriptures specifies no crying, no sorrow, or any kind of mourning is profitable to the deceased. His parents, however, remain grieved. Hi, it's me. Mum has passed away, said my wife on the phone, with these words of a disconcerting simplicity and without sobbing in the voice, to tell me the disappearance of her beloved mother. Unlike the rituals surrounding a death in Laos, where everything takes place at the deceased's home in the West, everything happens at the hospital, with a few exceptions in some countries or states of the US. But Lao nationals try to respect and reproduce the same rites because they are aware of the soul of the dead, called Vinana in Pali, or in Lao consciousness. One must find peace to allow him or her, I'm going to say both, him or her, to live peacefully in harmony with his family and his environment, and in harmony with himself. As soon as the death is confirmed, as the sick room is transformed into a mortuary chamber with a sheet, usually it's a white sheet, I find, hung across the door as the distinctive sign of change. The weeping family gathered around the beds of monks, with at least 3, are invited to give their first blessings, reciting the prayer of the dead, the Matika or Matika. Matika. In order to transfer the Buddhist precepts or sentam to the deceased, and anicca vata sakha. Oh, that's Sanskrit. Okay, I wonder why I can't read that. In some US states, California and Portland, for instance, the first ritual may take place at home. When the end of life has occurred for various reasons, the corpse will then be taken to the funeral home while waiting for the official funerals. Forgiveness and purification. On this occasion, close members of the family would ask for forgiveness from the dead with two objectives. One, to obtain the reign of harmony in both worlds, the physical and the metaphysical, or the ether, or the bardo. Because the bardo is the transitionary state, not necessarily in the physical or in the ether, sort of the transition of both worlds. The visible and the invisible, basically the ether, because that's the doorway anyway, in order to allow the dead to follow his own path without having to worry about the fate of the living. To forgive each other operates an effective purification, noted Marcel Zargot, because it avoids feelings of guilt, said Sonemani Nicole, before adding it allows to settle one's accounts so that the dead can leave in peace and would have no reason to come back and to annoy the living. So there's the purification aspect, and then there's the detachment aspect. I'm guessing those are both the objectives. 2X, she said that we need to stop picking inside the house because she doesn't go to pick, and then the cousin said that I'm not part of the family anymore. Mind you, he is family, then we're arguing inside the house. 2X, I'm done with that, but I'm going to help out because it needs to be more. It needs to be more because my two aunts are greedy AF. As long as you can get it sorted out, man, never let extended family members steal your peace. Do not let them steal your peace. Peace is yours, granted to you from greater powers that are. In Lao cosmology, forgiveness is of great importance because of our belief in the existence of born merit or beneficence. And Bab, sin, or tear, kind of, I guess that's an Abrahamic parallel framework. And because of our perpetual search of the famous harmony, the prerequisite for obtaining happiness here and in the afterlife. That's why we organize the ceremony of forgiveness at Pimei Lao, New Year, Pimei Lao, at a wedding, or even during the precepts days or Bansi. That is to say, the 15th days of the increasing and decreasing moon. In the West, Lao nationals also practice this ritual on Mother's Day or on their parents' birthdays. Territorial continuum. As in Lao, the family gets help from an officiant who registers religious customs and prayers in Pali. It also precedes the symbolic mortuary bath by sprinkling perfume or eau de cologne on the body of the deceased. This ritual can be quite painful and charged with strong emotions, even with crying and violent sobs. It is the very first time that relatives find their loved ones without a vital breath. Sometimes they were talking about things and others even making plenty of plans for the future, just in the evening of the day before. In addition, the small size of the room doesn't allow them to sit in accordance with Buddhist canons as in their native country. To pay a dignified and compassionate tribute to their dear departed, often parents are forced to stand around the bed of the dead with hands clapped in front of their hearts like this, as a sign of respect and homage, much like you see in Thailand. Similar to Thailand in a way. Very similar to Thailand. The huge pain linked to the loss of a loved one is then multiplied by nostalgia and the obligation to entrust him or her to his or her last home, far away, very far away from his or her native land, without any material link with his or her ancestors. I'm going to make a side note. Ancestral veneration is quite important in Laos, and it's believed that the ancestors reincarnate within you, and they guide you throughout your transitions in various incarnations of life, actually. Ancestral veneration, not worship, veneration, they're not the same thing, is very, very big in Vietnam and Laos and Thailand and Burma and countries like this. We're buried in the homeland. This raises the question of territory continuity, which is typically within the blood. I'm going to take a page out of Rudolf Steiner's Occult Significance of Blood, his book, that territorial continuity is in the spirit body. The spirit body is in the blood is the life, as the Abrahamic framework and traditions do argue in their scripture. Actually, they mention that in their scripture, and that the blood carries the memory of the ancestral spirits as well. So it's sort of all connected and tied together to genetics and epigenetics, of which the Vada Buddhists, either they are Khmer, Thai, Burma, Sri Lanka, and Laos, of course, pass on the merits to their deceased parents through the monks and Me Thoreni, the mother of Laos, the earth goddess. But they don't say Mai Thoreni, there's Me Thoreni, Me Thoreni. Thanks to the pouring of lustral water on the ground. Okay, that's what that represents. That's purification. And also renewal of the earth and renewal of the earth body into the spiritual body. The famous Yatnam, which is the center of all transfers of gifts and born to the deceased. Buddha used to say every piece of land, whether it may be, may well have harbored our bones in previous lives, or may have been the site of a sima. This is why we must always ask for prior permission from protective genius before undertaking any work. So the head of Wat, Judge, east of Paris, to provide an indirect answer to this nascent fear. The venerable implied, in particular, the higher beings, the Vinana of the dead, can travel freely through the universe without any spatial or material hindrance. But then, why a great-granddaughter of Vientiane had well inhabited by the spirit of a grandfather, who died a long time ago and told the family that his wife, also deceased, and gone to France to accompany his daughter-in-law, could not get back home alone because he needed the daughter-in-law within the same bloodline to bring the bones back into Vientiane from France, so the proper rituals could be done, so the spirit body could move on from the actual physical body. It was all tied very deeply to the genealogy, and that his son had to take it back to Laos, making a trip to their homeland. 2x. I don't argue with them, I just talk to them unless they talk to me first. Both the aunts who were greedy, they asked me why I was taking a break. Okay, good. Set your boundaries. Set your boundaries. Be respectful, as in civil. By respectful, I mean civil. But set your boundaries. I'm working on this too. Was on my feet all day and they were sore and my back was killing me because I had to bend down up and out. Were you renovating? Sounds like you're renovating the house. Perfume and eau de cologne. In any case, the ritual of the mortuary bath is much less structured and much less elaborated than that practiced in Laos. Just a little bit of perfume sprinkled on the body without breath of life of the loved one. In the 1960s to the 1970s, Lao people used sandalwood water in Kek and Sompoi in Laos, or acacia concina water in the Ba Sak, according to Charles Achiambult. Can't say his last name. In the other areas of Laos, lukewarm water and then cold water were used for mortuary baths to symbolize the necessary duality of things and beings. It is one of the laws of nature that the simultaneous existence of opposites, cold and heat, happiness and grievance, the best and the worst, birth and death, and so on, stress Pierre, Som Nin. This dichotomy can also have ordinary water, impurity, and coconut juice, representing purity, which are poured on the deceased's face just before cremation. Besides, it is just one of many differences with practice in Laos. The family is not allowed to carry the dead for his last trip on Earth. In France and Paris, for instance, living parents have to choose his or her favorite clothes and give them the mortuary room service that realizes rather a good job. In general, the family has naturally had to give advices or preferences as to the desired final appearance of their loved one. So there are no longer double clothes as in Laos, the one put upside down, that of the dead one, and the other normally that of the living one. This duality is a symbol of the infinite succession of birth and death, said P.S. Nin. Charles R. Chambolt noted that one has to tear the skirt and the jacket. One of the buttons of the jacket has to be torn off. R.G. Woodthorpe, 1882, had also seen similar practices by the Hathigoria in India, who made holes in the clothes of the dead in order to make them feel useless for anyone who might be tempted to steal them. No silver coins or gold. Lao nationals living in the West do not give his or her favorite belongings to the deceased. Oh, sorry, I misread that. That totally changes the context. Lao nationals living in the West do give his or her favorite belongings to the deceased. Handbags, shoes, scarves, and so on, as well as the bang. I think the bang's the sash. That's that sash that they wear. You would have seen me wear something like this in my traditional clothing on the posts of this channel. Cones made of banana leaves or paper confer. Oh, I've seen this. The bang are offered at the altars of the dead and also the altars of the temples. Cones made of banana leaves or paper containing money, flowers, and a pair of candles. Yeah, they give these to the temples and also to the deceased and also to the Buddha as well. The Buddha and Mai Thorani. But we carefully avoid to put in the coffin of metallic objects such as mobile phones, of course, knives, and so on, as it's the customs in Laos for security reasons. For the same reasons, jewels, a gold and silver coin are not put in the mouth of the corpse of the deceased like they do in some other cultures. You can't do that. Shouldn't do that. To avoid jealousy of people tempted to steal those riches, which kind of makes sense because there's that forgiveness ceremony where they try to amend the deeds of the living from the deeds of the dead in the astral. So you don't want to accumulate bad attachments even onto death in that transition period. The two main reasons preside over these changes. On one hand, the death is incinerated in high temperature ovens. Okay, so cremation. Silver or gold jewels would have been completely melted, so there is no use putting them in the coffin since the main purpose is to be given to a living member of the family by death. In Laos, the chosen relative would find the jewels during the collection of the bones. On the other hand, the ashes are collected by employees of the funeral home, who puts them in an urn before giving them to the family. Therefore, the dead has only money from the bang and the yod muk's content sent to her or him through donations to the monks to pay for the passage or to buy flowers, candles, and incense sticks in order to pay tribute to the Ketkau Cholamani Stupa, which is believed to be the seventh floor of the paradise, according to Orkin Somforpati, a scholar of Lao culture and civilization. I'm going to save his name. I'm going to save that name in my Discord. Lao, saving you there. Okay, Still, the real function of these gold or silver coins is rather problematic, and specialists sometimes have contradictory opinions. A viaticum, to live with the fi or the nin, basically the spirits, the elemental spirits, the earth spirits, the water spirits, the air spirits, the fire spirits, the spirits of metal, the spirits of the ether and the caves and beyond. Thunder spirits, a means to pay for the cross of the river that separates the world of the living from that of the deaths, or a means to pay for the guardian of the gates of the afterlife. That sounds a little bit like Egyptian cosmology, actually. A little bit like Egyptian cosmology too. While Zagos sees a way to derive attachment to material goods, the Mahakala, they venerate the Mahakala. Wow. That's a surprise to me. That's a Hindu deity. That's a Hindu deity, which is it's like a big, dark, Shakti entity, dark beyond dark, so dark that in the dark of night you will still see it. That's how dark it is. But basically, the Mahakala serves a protective role. It's a guardian entity which basically fights off the Asuras and some of the Asuras and the demons and the impurities. It's a purification entity as much as it is a guardian entity that fights off evil beings. It's a good entity. Quoted by François Lagiade, also speaks of a paradoxical act executed by mockery. That's the same idea underlined by Robert Halliday, the linguist. Robert Halliday, the linguist. I wonder if that's Robert Halliday, the linguist. And Kyo Dun, when they mention the point of irony, a malicious and sarcastic act that emphasized the ultimate uselessness of wealth. Then another hot question is raised. Will those who have passed on in West, very far away from their ancestral lands, be condemned to wander eternally between two worlds, without gold or silver coin in his or her mouth? No monk or close relatives of the deceased have ever raised this thorny problem in France or in the USA, and assuming that the souls of those who have died in the West have always reached their final destination, namely to be at peace and in harmony with themselves, with their families, and with their near and far environment, it is permissible to discuss the relevance of this practice in Theravada Buddhist countries. All right. 2x. My grandma's house has her house full of stuff. We're not renovating it. We're just wanting to get things out. If anyone wants it, we're going to sell it. Okay. She's downsizing. I see. She's downsizing. If we want it, we get it. No, we're not renovating. We're just getting stuff out of her house. If anyone wants it, they get it. We're going to sell it. What's weird is that every time we go back to the house after we eat lunch and I get back, I get dizzy. I told my mom, she said I'm probably dizzy because I was bending down, up and over. Possibility to do with blood flow to the brain. Another possibility just could be to do with the chaos of that transition as well. Altar and photos. Another great difference in the ritual of death in Western urban settings compared to practice in Laos, Thailand, Cambodia, or other Theravada countries is the funeral vigil organized at the former home of the deceased without his body, kept in the cold room of the hospital where he has ended his existence on earth. But several families have recognized that this absence does not hinder the smooth running of the whole ritual, and even some benefits. They underline specifically the small size of apartments or even houses, an unfavorable environment where Lao nationals are often living alone, isolated in their neighborhood among the French or Americans, and finally the absence of the coffin of the Honadi is less scary for people with sensitive souls, and for those who believe in spirits or fi or ghosts. I don't believe that that translates specifically into ghosts. I think there's other forms of fi, such as like the giant or the tall skeletal hungry fi, as well as the fi that haunt the forests, and the spirits of the birds, as well as the spirits of the earth and the Mekong Delta River, and the Naga Fi, and other. There's so many classes of Fi. Fi is such a loose term. It is not the same as ghost. It's just not. That's a misconception. Nevertheless, the spirits of the dead, a higher being, are still able to go freely where they want, to take care of a relative, or to play with the nerves of others, though inadvisable, cosmically inadvisable to do so. One night on April 2017, a monk who was driving his delegation back to the residence from Humanis was quite surprised to hear the GPS tell him to turn right when he should go left, and vice versa, because the grandmother didn't want to see the master, who she loves and respects since his first steps in Buddhism some 60 years ago in Laos, to leave so soon that evening. So after the death of a loved one, the close members of the family gather at the deceased's former home to prepare everything so that all the elements of a traditional funeral sigil are in place for the prayers of the Anika Rata Sakara on the big Kursara of the evening, just like the logistics to accommodate in Lao style, with food and drink at any time, family, relatives, friends, and neighbors, and so on. A special care has to be given to the transport of the venerable for the next 3 nights. Thus, a specialist of Buddhist floral art will take care of the preparation of Hanha or Hanpad or Makbang or Yodmuk, the central element of Lao Buddhist ritual, as well as photos of the deceased, so that they would come to receive gifts and the born transmitted to him by the family. In the US, and for technical reasons, she's dead, Dennis. She's been dead for a couple of years now. Sorry for your loss, man. Sorry for your loss. In the US, and for technical reasons, waiting for close members of the family to arrive from Laos, Thailand, or elsewhere, the 3 nights vigil may be organized later, for example, 3 days before cremations. A close relative must stay all the time in front of the altar, where a large statuette of Buddha has also been installed to welcome visitors, to receive their gift, and to thank them with health, success, and happiness wishes. Unlike the practice in Laos, where a gift for a dead person is made of silver, flowers, candles, and raw rice, in the West it is limited to an envelope with money, like a hongbao. And the hosts usually provide a han, and flowers to the visitors in donors. Maybe that's similar to a Thai version of a hongbao. This trend has also been noted in Lao urban areas, especially in Vientiane, the capital Nigole. Donation, solidarity, sharing. Mo'oi and fo'oi. Mr. or Mrs. is here today to pay tribute to you with the donation and respect. Please accept them and give him or her your protection and blessings. Would shout to the altar the person responsible for the welcome of relatives, friends, and neighbors. At the same time, donors or mourners would raise the han in front of their head as a sign of respect and deep consideration, while uttering the deceased their wishes for a smooth existence, full of peace, and where there are only harmony and the absolute cessation of everything at their ultimate destination. That's to say, real happiness, heavens, or nirvana. In Laos, would throw a handful of rice toward the coffin to inform the death of the donation. The absence of rice in the donation of the West deprives an essential dimension of the obligatory reunion of the Lao community, especially in such painful circumstances. So Mani Nagol has underlined the great importance of putting together rice donated to the rice brought by each person, mixed and cooked together, which implies that everyone eats the rice from the community. The strong symbolism helps to strengthen the bonds of the community that is going through a difficult ordeal. Such as an example here, the rice near Luang Prabang, and everyone can feel responsible for and a part of the smooth running or not of the event. This pooling of community rice also takes place at parties organized to mark the different stages of life in Laos according to the Buddhist calendar. Villagers can also donate bananas, coconuts, sweet potatoes, or banana leaves, which are very useful in making bangs and mukbangs. Each time I go back to my home village, synonym for a party and or basi. I consume with sweet pleasure this rice composed of dissimilar grains of multiple colors, but which, like the legendary solidarity of our little people, stick together perfectly to form one and only one social unit. Unlike all those villagers who do not hide their joy at meeting me again, so delighted and so happy to share with us that sticky rice does not exist anywhere outside of these special circumstances of communion and sharing. It's an extraordinary condensed Lao culture and Lao philosophy of sharing and solidarity in a single bite of sticky rice. The grains of glutinous rice put in a dish will stay together independently without any interaction, without any cooperation, without any mutual help between them. Every single grain rubs shoulders of the other without ever going into fusion. On the contrary, as soon as it is cooked, sticky rice becomes unity, one, only, and unique. It represents beauty, it calms hunger, and gives satisfaction to those who consume it, said the Thai Venerable Jia Tong Tornon Center of France in July 2017. When we come together to practice meditation, pay tribute to the triple jewel, we become one and a forceful unity like sticky rice once cooked. Even when we are separated, we will always remain united by the Dharma, like a sticky rice ball, the Venerable said, thus adding a spiritual dimension to this staple of a large part of the world's population. And what a beautiful illustration of Buddha's thought on the gift. What is important, what is primordial in a donation is neither its content nor its quality, but the noble intention by its author, laughter and harmony. The visitor of the day then joins the family members to discuss, prepare floral arrangements or funerals for food, fruit and cakes for takbat in the morning. He will either share lunch or dinner with everyone in the community of the good house. Open permanently to the outside world, and the community is always full of people. Either they are members of the family or mourners until the day after the funeral and the first day in memory of the deceased. In Lao Born or Chokao, bursts of laughter and songs or lam can be heard during these evenings, and they are with no doubt the perfect illustrations of a certain detachment of Lao nationals in relation to death. Some even say that it is the deceased who dictates the general atmosphere by himself. If he has left in peace and harmony with his family, he or she will make the joy and concord, fraternity and love prevail in the household, especially for the Lao Buddhists. The deceased is always at its former home with his relatives, mingling with everyone's business, teasing some, hiding some items, for example, or helping others to find solutions to their problems. The only difference is that we do not see him or her anymore in the flesh. I still feel her presence, I said a very dear friend from Lily, or Lille, as soon as he was at our home to pay tribute along with his wife to a lady who he has known since his very first years as a reporter in Strasbourg. The east of Strasbourg. There's a Strasbourg in France? Really? I thought there was only a Strasbourg in Germany. There's a Strasbourg in the east of France. Wow. He especially appreciated Asian dishes cooked with love and taste by my mother-in-law, and in the first place, sticky rice with coconut milk and durian, and of course, the famous la, or Laotian steak tartare. 3 daily meals. The most palpable and the most materialistic illustration of the actual presence of the deceased at his or her former home is the setting up of the 3 daily meals in front of the altar at his or her photo with the same dishes as those consumed by the living, in addition to his or her favorite food or drink. I remember with very much emotion the morning ritual provided by a niece from Laos, and for the whole of the funeral watch, she was going to buy croissants and chocolate bread for her grandmother in the same bakery exactly as she did. Oh, that's nice. During the week of her convalescence at home. There she is. There's the altar, and there is the offering with the flowers and the seeds and the other flowers on the white candle and the foods, all in white to represent purity and renewal and rewashing of the spirit. I'm dealing with something still. I'm not okay. Damn, man. Well, if it's any consolation to X, I'm kind of in a very odd transition period in my life. My this is also partially why I haven't been streaming. My old self has just completely collapsed. My identity has collapsed. I'm lost. The Aussie housing markets kind of price me out, and I'm in this weird transition period where I'm in limbo. I make money, I make decent money, and I can save money when I live at my dad's, but I'm in limbo. Like, I can't move out, and I can't self-individuate the way that I want to. Anyways, 2 explanations can be given concerning this ritual of meals, which is provided by the Lao nationals wherever they are living. First of all, their intimate conviction that a recent death before his funeral at the Shekhao still has all his vital energy and has all the rights to live at home, his home, as well as that of eating and drinking, as well as he was still alive. During this period, it is possible to contract directly the deceased without the intermediary of monks because of a stronger vital energy than during his lifetime. Secondly, the Lao are convinced that all good deeds, in particular the offering of food, are the mother of gifts insofar they contribute to the preserving of the most precious thing of the living world, the life, the vital breath. And they also don't know how to strongly believe they'll receive in turn born or merits either for the time being or in the next existence, either as a human being or in nirvana. In the evening, monks and family gather together for the prayer of the Anitsavata Sankhara to pay for the tribute and to transfer merits of the deceased. Even the deep essence of prayers are called to the living, for they do not lament their fate. For that, they do not lament their fate and their attachments regarding the ephemeral body in particular, and to become one with the impermanence where the pure wisdom resides. Can there be joy and laughter when the world is consumed so quickly? Should not you? On the contrary, seek the light of wisdom before darkness falls. A passage of the prayer especially challenges the living before adding, what's this body that we rely on? Glorial and impermanent and unstable mass which declines with diseases, fragile, it disintegrates over the years to lead to death, an inescapable course. However, it should be noted that few people understand Bali apart from ancient monks. These chants, therefore, are mostly experienced by family and friends of the deceased as a way to get in touch and to keep in touch with him or her, since all listen to the sacred words without understanding their deep meaning, sitting cross-legged, clasped hands as a sign of respect and meditation. Clasped hands like this, or like this. But these chants feel a real and important social function from the sociological ethnological point of view, that they punctuate the vigil and remind the living of their inevitable fate, death, put in communion the whole community of destiny, reassure some and comfort of others. As in Laos, the family provides all that is necessary for monks, such as drinks, cigarettes, and of course, bang, a cone made of paper, or banana leaf containing a pair of candles, flowers, and money. Researchers and some Orientalists have discussed the purpose of these bang essential elements in any Buddhist ritual, including assimilating them to a salary given to monks in exchange for a service or reclaiming prayers in salary. Among the offerings that are made to the monks, a particular category that we find all the born and that have almost the appearance of a salary, or that are at least thanks for giving a service. These are small banana leaf cones containing a pair of candles, incense sticks, flowers, and 10 kip notes called bang, said Georges Codimas. After performing an ethnography of the death of Vientiane, Sonermani Ngol specified that the average sum contained in a bang amounts to 50,000 kips, €5. This money collected by the monks is then placed by them on bank accounts, and many young monks do finance their studies with these offerings. Noted the researcher with an important question: is it or not a reward? The faithful consider that this is not the case. However, it is indeed a monetary exchange for service rendered. The bonzes come to recite formulas, and then they receive their cornets. She added, in Lao and Buddhist traditions, life is made of sharing, mutual aid, filial piety, and community solidarity. If I decide to help a neighbor to build his house or to do rice harvest because I'm happy to do so, and because it's our way of life, he'll give me drinks and meal in exchange, not because he feels obligated to pay back my service, but it's just our way of life. So it's a dharmic. This is a dharmic exchange in a sense. This is a dharmic exchange. I do this because I'm happy and I'm willing to give. You give back to me because you are happy. You're from the rice harvesting lineage, and you're going to give me a need because you choose to give me a need, and because he's happy like me to do so. So these are bang. Bang, that's bang there. Bang land. Bang, a kind of salary, which would then be a total contradiction to Buddha's own philosophy of total detachment. Well, yeah, because it's economized. A bang would economize activity to then lead to economic attachment. The answer is undoubtedly to be found in that Sana sermon of Venerable Nyandaro Mahathera during the first years of his monastery of the School of the Monks in the Tournon south south of France in the 1980s. Damn. R.I.P. 2X. R.I.P. The monastery is very sensitive to the generosity of the faithful, without which our what would never have been here to welcome all of you to the Venerable to start with. But the monastery already has a dozen of rice workers, several friars, countless cookware, that we can't, of course, use all of them. We thank you once again for your regular donations, as well as your visit to the what and the most important dates of our calendar. However, and you do know very well, the monastery is obliged to pay for water, gas, electricity, and insurance as each of you. At the break after lunch, some elderly people used to donating the in-kind in Laos expressed their dissatisfaction with incomprehension and even a little anger. It's incredible The Venerable wants to give us money to the monastery, but for 20 years or so now, the practice of useful donation is accepted by all faithful, especially since all Buddhist pagodas in France are organized under the status of law 1901 association with income tax reduction for the donors. Interesting. French laws, hey? Nevertheless, it is interesting to distinguish two categories of gifts in money: the bong on one side and the gift to the religious community on the other. In the time of Buddha Sakyamuni, personal gifts were not welcome, and he had himself refused a monk dress offered by his foster mother, explaining that any gift should be addressed to the Sangha as a whole and not a monk in particular. If donations of money to the Sangha, which is entitled to a receipt to the faithful's tax return, do not raise any problem, since they contribute to the maintenance of normal life of pagodas in the West as well as in Laos. On the contrary, bungs are against Buddha's original philosophy and may put some monks at odds with the tax administration and health service. Being a personal gift, each monk can decide to keep the money for himself in order to build a personal reserve in case of a return to civilian life and not put in a common fund for the monastery. If at the beginning it is not clear when the practice of inserting money into a bang has exactly stated the amount was negligible and above all symbolic, it can reach quite a large sum now in the West. Some healthy families, for instance, do not look at expenses when it comes to transferring bun to a deceased parent. Alms should be given to those who make happy the one who makes the gift, said Buddha, and who better than monks can bring comfort, confidence, and some inner happiness to a bereaved family. A verse from sacred scriptures proclaims, just as water flowing from a hill falls into the valley, certainly the charity accomplished here can be profitable to the departed parent. Gratitude is another variety of bang. Okay, so it's like food rolled in with flowers, and the candles rolled in black paper with flowers. Gratitude. So at the beginning, these bungs had to fill the function of an individual offering tray, because in the Buddhist tradition, the flowers, symbols of beauty and impermanence par excellence, as well as candles and incense sticks, light, and the fragrances of Dhamma are the traditional tribute and respect paid to the triple jewel, Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, and that one always makes offerings to monks in order to show them respect and undoubtedly some form of recognition, not for what they accomplish, but especially for what they represent. Spiritual guides, teachers of thought, and intermediaries of the invisible world, a little bit like a shaman in a way. So they reassure some comfort to the bereaved families by death. They also give meaning to life for the faithful, reminding them of the impermanence of such things in beings. Still, it's a fact that the bang are offered to each monk attending the funeral office, whether it is at the deceased home or the hospital or the cold room, of course, the crematorium during the funeral, as in Laos. The venerable in charge of the Thetsana is entitled to an extra bang. Concretely, even a one-day's monk who takes the Buddhist dress to conduct the dead in his last home can receive up to 3 or 4 bang, which the amount is much smaller than those offered to the impermanent monks. One can easily imagine the sum, rather important, that can amass during a year. A vulnerable residing in Paris or in the suburbs, for example, because in tradition to the cyclical holidays of the Buddhist calendar, practically one per month, there are many such funerals or bun organized in memory of a dead, not to mention the days of precepts or van sin, and the 15 days of the increasing moon, where the faithful are more numerous at the pagoda. It should also be noted that monks have very little personal exposure to make apart from the purchase of a mobile phone, cigarettes, or books, living by the generosity and piety of the faithful. They are satisfied with the four necessities: food in a sufficient quantity to relieve hunger, to stay in good health, enough clothing to be decent in society and to protect the body, a safe shelter for calm exercise, and enough medicine to cure and prevent illness, cites David Loy. The faithful, and in particular those affected by a family mourning, nevertheless ask themselves such questions while getting comfort, security, divine protection, peace of mind, and a certain harmony of opposites, to feel happy to have been able to pay homage to their dead in accordance with the age-old tradition of their native country while they have lost a loved one, by listening to Anika Vata Sankara prayers and the venerable words of circumstance and comfort. Stanley J. Tambia rightly pointed out that monks do not only behave as mediators between death and rebirth, but they also absorb and neutralize the dangers and pollution of death. Their religious status protects them from danger. To keep company, as in Laos, a big candle will be lit permanently at the deceased's house during the funeral vigils, even after the first 3 nights of ritual prayers. Likewise, a yudmuk is laid beside the pictures of the deceased, as well as flowers, mokbong, hanha, hanpad, and in the same way, the practices observed in the Theravada countries, 1 or more persons will ensure a permanent presence in the room where the vigil is organized in order to keep the deceased company. This ritual has 2 meanings and fulfills 2 practical functions. First of all, it allows family members from far away, from abroad, or from other cities to find lodging and food. Secondly, those who are not living in the same village or the same city can be permanently at the Honadi to participate in all kinds of domestic work, and in particular the preparations for the takbad and the morning meal offering to the monks and people who might come to join the ritual. There is also a human and sentimental dimension to keep company with parents directly affected by mourning and to testify their family love. Early in the morning, the family is busy preparing the deceased breakfast before evening, taking care of the preparations of the takbad and the morning meal to offer to the monks. In Paris and in France and in the United States, most of the pagodas have a means of transport to drive the venerable to the place where the funeral vigil is held, and the family has then to compensate the monastery by regulating gas costs. As soon as everything is ready, a master of ceremonies will ask for the 5 precepts, Aratanasi in Lao, Aratanasi. After a tribute to the triple jewel and celestial deities performed with the whole audience, he will then ask for the prayer of Anika Vata Sakara, as well as that for the blessing and the transfer of merits all born to the dead just before the takbad ceremony. The monks then begin the prayer while the devotees are listening very focused, sitting cross-legged and hands together, and to put themselves in the best physical and mental conditions for Thanksgiving to come. When the time comes, the venerable responsible for the ceremony will invite the faithful to go and perform the takbad. Takbad, the pinnacle of donations, called almsgiving by the Anglo-Saxons, and Humanis, I can't pronounce that in French, I'm sorry, Almone by the French, takbad, not to be confused with bin tabat, or alms shrouds in English, which refers to the action of going to the faithful by the monks in order to receive their meal is an act of fundamental importance in our Buddhism cosmology and Theravada Buddhism in general, contrary to Western perception, which equates the founding act in the life of any Buddhist with a mother charity. Takpa represents the highest degree of gift or dana, which is simply the first of the 10 parami. Often translated by perfections, parami are transcendent to supreme virtues in Buddha's original meaning, as well as his first disciples and faithful. Dana parami, or perfection of giving, also proves to be the first subject of the gradual exposition of Dhamma, the first of 3 bases of meritorious action, and the first of 4 means benefiting others of one's own goodness. After the completion of Takbad ceremony, the Bard round, container made of iron or clay, burned 5 times and described by some Orientalists as having the shape resembling the protuberance of Buddha's inverted head, or donated as an offering to the monks. We say Khan in Lao, followed by the offering of trays and of foods and the taking of the meal by the venerable. Normally, worshippers must wait till the end of the meal before they can eat, but in some pagodas, and in order not to waste time, the older venerable can allow the laity to accompany them shortly after the meaning of their own meal. Very often serves as lunch as the second last meal of the day. The monks, while the takpa normally goes with the morning meal or breakfast. So it's a meal together. In general, monks perform a prayer of blessing and transfer of merits by the yajna to enable the faithful or transfer the meal and the born to their missing relatives. In France, this part of the ritual tends to be more and more performed just after the delivery of bad and meal trays. Sometimes venerable may be asked to give a thetsana, which would correspond to the sermon in Christianity, insofar as the monk would, like a priest or pastor, exposes the faithful the benefits or meritorious actions and consequences of harmful, negative, and acts contrary to Buddha's precepts, here and now, but also in future existence or in the afterlife. After the third ceremony of Anika Vata Sahara, the family can still invite the monks to a takbad or evening prayers until the funeral itself. Because of the constraints of various orders, there are generally only family members gathering for different kinds of work without the presence of bhikkhu. On the other hand, the ritual of the 3 daily meals for the dead is maintained and continues, given for a week after the cremation of the chakao. Beyond this time, it is necessary to go to a pagoda and transfer to the departed the meal and merits that accompany them through the monks. Another big difference compared to a funeral vigil in Lao land, few French or American neighbors will attend the Huanandi and will just send followers or a crown, while in Laos, the whole village or the whole city has the obligation and a societal duty to go and keep the bereaved family company, to help them, to show them solidarity, sympathy, and love. Some people even go to the Huanandi to bring fruits, vegetables, and cakes, and to provide help and solidarity. Bo'at, Nasup, and Bawat. I got my dog son with me. Hello! By the people, for the people, one of my OGs, 203. Good to see you on board. Just caught the stream. Sorry. Yes. Oh, US. No worries. I understand that there's a massive time difference. Like, I'm basically literally streaming from the future to my US audience. What's 2 p.m. here is probably closer to like 10 p.m. your time. probably a Saturday, 10 p.m. your time. So I'm generally like 10 to 14 hours ahead of American time in general. For technical reasons, lifting of the body in the morning, distance between the monastery and the different places of the morning ritual, bonzilons or novices, or I choyan lao of a day that will accompany the deceased to his last home are usually ordered in the evening before the funeral ceremony will then spend their night at the pagoda. It is the family's responsibility to take care of the stewardship of his short stay by providing, for example, breakfast to all the monks of the monastery in Bussy, the St. George, and in the suburbs of Paris. A person from the management committee of the pagoda can take care of all of the aspects related to the ordination of these novices of a day, religious clothing and their cleaning afterward, presence of a master of ceremonies, meeting with the venerable, and so on. Therefore, there will be a boat naso to be ordained in front of the corpse of the coffin. Since the ordination takes place at a pagoda, this practice can also be seen even in Laos, where there are too many candidates to take Buddha's clothes. At my father's funeral, the author's father's funeral in August 2013, there were 52 I Choi aspirants and 55 aspiring nuns, or Mukau in Laos, and the Wat Na Sop ceremony was held at the pagoda of our village. The novices and nuns of the day went to Hunende for the session of Anicca Vata Sakhara, along with the venerable of 9 pagodas of the region. So this is the ceremony here. Wat Na Sopat Pagoda, 2013. And these must be they look young. You see the candidates here, they look young. There's the candidates there. The ordination of the ceremony for the escort of a dead. For the escort of a dead during his last ceremony on earth contains a very strong symbolism. To abandon even temporarily secular life is like dying a little bit before being reborn in another life, the monastic one. The dead rebirth duality is present in all Laotian and Buddhist ceremonies. To leave the secular life reveals itself as the highest act of love and the ultimate sacrifice, since the living is symbolically put into the same state as the dead, to be as close as possible to him, and to find oneself in communion and symbiosis with the person who is leaving forever. If the monks, even for a day, absorb and neutralize the dangers and pollution of death, Tambia, George Condominas believed the possibility of passing from the state of laity to that of religion and vice versa makes the links between monks and the rest of the population even closer, because of the necessary duality as the day and the night, the secular and religious being interdependent. No one can exist without the other. Even the masters of the school of the forest monks need from time to time donations from the faithful living in villages or towns. The village or the town's district and the pagoda usually have the same name because they really exist only when both entities are there. In the West, whether it's in Paris, Strasbourg, that's not German Strasbourg, that's French Strasbourg, by the way, Honolulu, Portland, or San Diego, the day's novices and nuns will go directly to the funeral of the hospital, where the body of the dead is departed, of the dear departed parent, is kept and guided by the closest venerable of the family. They will say goodbye to the dead along with their kin. After Buddhist ceremony, the coffin is closed long before being transported to the crematorium for public and official funeral services. In San Diego, the bereaved family might ask for permission to transport the coffin to the pagoda for 1 or 2 nights of vigil before the funeral. In France and in Paris, and in the Paris region in particular, some families have chosen to organize a funeral vigil at a what for practical monks are on site, and technical reasons, availability of a larger space, a large cooking with dishes, cutlery in large numbers, and chairs and so on, but also social reason to allow the faithful going to the pagoda during this period of time to participate if they wish to the mourning with the grieving family, and to increase the same time their merits all born. For a Lao, especially if he or she is a Buddhist, to take part in a customary event and to help his neighbors who are affected by grievance, and to share their sorrows and to relive their suffering, even though for a little bit is a highly important and social action, since it is a societal commitment of the primarily importance to enter the visible circle of the community and to become a full member of a family, the great family of solidarity and mutual aid. Once initiated, like an Indian doctor just graduated from Oxford or Harvard, bathing in the sacred waters of the Ganges, the Lao citizen, whether he is or she is, will never be alone again. Similarly, the young Indian doctor will never be boycotted by the villagers, his patients or customers. That is a katafoke. With its decorations. I've seen these around, even in Australia. I've seen a couple of these around. If in some American states, crematorium is located inside the funeral home, in France, the funeral cortege led by a hearse carrying a coffin must sneak in the middle of the city traffic to get to the place of the Buddhist and civil ceremony, totally unrelated to the dignity and respect surrounding the last journey of the dead in Lao land. If the space of the crematorium is big enough, a procession with professional monks and 1 day's novices and nuns pulling the coffin, followed by the family with the help of a cotton herd, like in Laos, is organized just before the funeral itself for Sonemanimigone. It's the opening of the way of paradise of the dead. The same ritual as in Laos. Then the rest of the ritual is exactly the same as the one observed in Arunachal land, paying of reeds, religious section, tribute to the triple jewel, the taking of the 5 precepts, the chanting of Anisa Vata Sakara Sanghara, and the great Husla offering of Fa Bang So Hun, the prayer of transmission of born and so on, followed by a secular part, biography of the deceased, thanks to biography of the deceased, thanks and family farewells. And before the deposit of Dok Mai Chan, a single silk flower or a flower with a pair of candles on the coffin to show respect and to say the last farewell to the deceased by all the assistants, starting with the monks and 1 day's bonzilums, the nuns and the family. The latter then receive the condolences as well as the testimonies of friendship and solidarity of the assembly, to which the bereaved family gives each one an envelope containing a letter of thanks and a lucky dollar note in memory of the generosity of the loved person. How much more? This is a very, very long article. Quite a bit. I'm just going to pause. I need a drink of water. There's still quite a bit to read. If the funeral is held in early afternoon, a light meal, sandwich, fruit or cake or water is offered to members of this community destiny, while the monks had served before midday in accordance with the canons of Buddhism. When the time of cremation has arrived, the funeral staff remove the coffin while Fong Ha Kao, rain of gems, that can be imperfectly translated as divine rain or miraculous rain, coins of euros, cents wrapped in aluminium foil or folded $1 bills mixed with candy pours on the audience, wishing them fortune. 11:03 p.m. Saturday. Ooh, I was off by 1 hour. Divine or miracle rain. This ritual of divine rain, so-called Vane Kalakfuk in some regions of Laos, can also be done with the Kartok popcorn like pot rice, mixed with coins or banknotes folded. Sometimes the flower petals and seeds are added, and in other places we speak of Ban Ka San, the throwing of raw rice, and Ba Ne Ka Tok Tok, without giving them specific names. This ritual is carried out all along the journey between Ho Nadi and the place of cremation by an old man's headdress with a conical hat, a sign of dignity according to Chambals. But whatever its name, Laos scholars and Orientalists cannot agree on its true meaning. If Shal Chambult sees two functions, invite the lost souls of the dead, follow him to the ceremony, and entertain the attention of the fee so they do not climb on the coffin and weigh it down. Stanley Tambia talks about feeding these the same evil spirits, just like Yukio Hayashi and Marcel Zago, adding to a second interpretation, a dead individual, just like the rice that can never grow back, will never be reborn in the same person. Well, the venerable Nyadala Buddhists of Tibet and China also practice this same ritual, which is primarily intended to express the generosity of the family towards the land or the nourished by these indirect offerings of fertilizer, but also birds, animals, and all living beings that can thus satisfy their hunger if he recognizes the gesture of mockery and derision towards the living. Once dead, we can sow as much as we want, it will never grow. He refutes the idea of distraction as malicious fee by explaining that these invisible beings have neither soul nor consistency and therefore no weight. They are like wind. In a reference book on the culture and traditions of the Lao country, Lan Shang Cultural Heritage, and the Buddhist Central Committee of Religious Studies assert that the throw of raw rice is intended to lighten the coffin by inviting the fee to leave the coffin and go for food. It also provides a more philosophical explanation. The raw grain of rice can no longer be used to grow new rice plants. Likewise, a human being who has reached his end will no longer be born or dead. As an explanation, the committee provided a prayer to be recited by Vanakal San's attendant Nati Loke Amanatong. There is no place in this world where people and animals do not die. As for the throwing of ha, it satisfies the same first function as raw rice, whereas in the second season, challenges above all the living of impermanence in the form of parable, adds death, the name and body, separate, just like the whose bark is useless and can be thrown away, separated from the grain of rice, white, blissful, and usable since consumable at the time of the bursting of the paddy. The prayer in Pali to be recited during this action perfectly illustrates this dichotomy. Fietsati poti Monteho Mamaraman Tangi Sibi Tanton. All bodies will rot and burst because all life ends in death. It's about as real as it gets. Don't think you can get any more real than that. In the Western urban context, just give me a moment, guys. I need a drink break. My apologies. In the Western urban context, these explanations prove not only inappropriate, but do not fulfill any technical or material need. The coffin is transported by hearse to the crematorium. then placed on a wheeled casket. In addition to the fon hako, is composed only of coins wrapped in aluminium foil or folded ones, dollars, bills mixed with flower petals and or candies that takes place inside the crematorium. Finally, the ritual is lived in joy and in laughter, each person trying to collect these coins or lucky charms in memory of the kindness and generosity of the departing person. Sonemani Nigoli also noted the same phenomenon during the funeral in Vientiane, where Sa Pa Lu funeral agents take care of everything as in the West. She especially pointed out that the coffin is carried only over a short distance by close members of the family, and that this action took place when the procession arrived at the pagoda. Therefore, following the Kaotok to the ground should not be used to feed the spirits, to prevent them from climbing on the coffin and weighing it down, unless its purpose is to serve as gifts to the spirits away from residing on the spot, so that a newcomer is well received. That way, the fee who comes to welcome the dead will be happy, said Okin So Folklore, the scholar of Lao culture and civilization. These reasons that never have been codified that induce Lao overseas nationals to perform Fon Ha Ki ritual at the precise moment when the coffin is being taken to the oven by the funeral staff. And it can completely change the perspective of this act, originally intended for the fee and a lesson to the living, while opening the original track on the purposes of this ritual, which in many ways similar to that observed to Thesana, entitled Bot Ma Kiago, to cradle to purify oneself. If in the United States the family has the possibility of setting the coffin on fire, as in Lao land, pressing the ignition button of the oven in Europe and in France in particular, it is the employees of the Pompes Funebris to take care of it, as well as the collection of ashes that they will later give to the children of the deceased. Whatever the choice of the family or the wishes of the departing person, the urn containing the ashes is then entrusted to a pagoda, pending its final destination, return to the homeland, installation in a cemetery or in a stupa, as at the Thai pagoda or Mosir Shah Musi Kamaye. I can't pronounce that in French. My French is so bad. At the beginning of the crematorium, the scented water seal with the flowers petals is available to all, so that everyone can wash and purify oneself before returning to his home in harmony and under the protection of celestial divinities, thanks to the born or merits acquired by sharing the pain and sorrows of the family affected by the mourning. The symbolism of washing oneself before going back home is a wonderful illustration of the dichotomy of the different stages of life, even after death, of a Lao Buddhist. This is the harmony of opposites inherent in all action. On one hand, attending funerals means putting oneself in direct contact with death, defiling one's body and mind, losing one's harmony, and being physically disturbed by crying and sobs, and or psychologically disturbed by strong emotions. On the other hand, the act of societal piety or family or community solidarity, and those who are illustrated by the mourning, as well as the testimony of respect and love for the departing person, are sources of born and karmic improvement. Hence the need for the ritual of symbolic purification, to keep the only positive and auspicious elements: wash your hands and refresh your face. Two of the three ends of the living being that were in direct contact with death, and the third of the feet having been under protection of socks and shoes. It is interesting to note that the only laity submit themselves to this purifying act, the monks and novices, even those one day are being protected by their religious status, because they absorb and neutralize the dangers and pollution of death. Tambia. Even in Laos, the large majority of people who've been taking part in the funerals usually go back home directly without going through the former Huanadi, who will soon come back, or who will soon become why they're born, with the first ceremony in memory of the disappeared Chakao. Buckets of scented water awaiting the members of this one-day community at the exit of the cremation place. Harmony of opposites. The best illustration of this harmony of opposites is the divine rain coins, banknotes, and sweets, which are considered as lucky charms, and the testimony of the goddess, our goodness and generosity of the departing person are collected joyfully by the audience before being carefully preserved, and with a little bit of fetishism by each participant. Whoever has picked up a raindrop of divine rain, for example, and keeps it on oneself will always have silver and gold falling on him like the drops of his Fon Kako, said Soam Di Pakti Foti. At the same time, it is strictly forbidden to bring anything back home: food, cakes, fruits, drinks, and so on. We must consume them on the spot so as not to let the evil spirits that can roam the cemetery or the crematorium follow us, because they can attach to such things. It is the same fear that has led to the ban on pregnant women at funerals. That's interesting. The fetus, which does not yet have a biological and psychic protection of already physically constituted, could be attacked or at least disturbed. That's a very, very interesting belief. Interesting. I'm listening to your reading while finishing a painting. Well, that sounds awesome. Hell yeah. Would you get this to evolve into a documentary if you had the resources? I think documentaries exist of this, but I'll try and find one or two. It's a fascinating article to read, indeed. JC, Chad Sell 3.0 in the house. It's been a long time, man. I hope all has been well, Dennis. Off to bed. Just want to let you know, been rocking with you from the start and watching replays of your lives. Now, there's a G. There's a G. I appreciate that. Thank you, JC. I appreciate that. Nothing wrong with replays. These are very, very esoteric, niche, oddball topics. We don't do normal on this channel. Ghosts, demons, funerals, weird stuff. That's what we do in this channel. These are not everyday normie topics. Oh, goodness, no. We don't do normal here. Normalcy on an occult channel? Come on. As in Lao Land, 3 ceremonies are held back at the former home of the deceased, with all the members of the close family to mark the end of the sequence, that of the death, and the pursuit of another, that of life, prayers of blessing, that of the household to defrock the one day's I Choi and the Basi, symbol of par excellence, of the joy of living, and Lao fraternity. Too many languages, Lao and French, too many languages at the same time. Okay, so there's another WordPress article there, and then there's another WordPress article here. The blessing prayer or auspicious prayer, called in Lao Sot Mong Hom, is performed by all the venerable present at the funeral, or only some of them, depending on the availability and the presence of one day's bonzilians. On a technical level, this ritual looks like Sot Bot Nam and can perfectly be translated as the blessing prayer with lustral water. That's the cosmic divine water to wash the body and the spirit and make it pure again. Partially in reverence of Mai Torani, which is the mother goddess of Laos. A large bowl of offerings were all in Lao, containing scented water with flower. They did this in Thailand too, actually. I just realized this. With flower petals, pieces of roasted carrots replacing the turmeric, on which is laid a large candle map of multitude of small tampered candles made by hand with beeswax, symbolically representing all members of the family, from first cousins to affinity. Each is entitled to three stems. His head circumference, the height of his torso from the throat to the navel, and the length of his forearm from the elbow to the end of the index finger. One must make as many marks as his age +1, with his nails on each of them in hope for a long and harmonious existence to come. Together forever. The pulling of these tapered candles twisted together with each other as to better underline this extraordinary solidarity and family strength. This symbolic meeting of all the living members of the lineage, including those who are absent, from whom we have prepared candles, have multiple meanings and aim for multiple purposes. First of all is to wash oneself from the stain of death with the water blessed by the venerable, the monk, and made all the more effective and auspicious that the entire family community has placed its vital essence through the 3 candles that, by burning, drop into the water droplets of wax, as if everyone poured into a little of his own blood. We wash our own face with the sacred water, put a few drops on our head before mixing it with water on the bath or the shower for a more complete cleaning of the body, by expressing the wishes to expel with one sacred water that all that is bad and harmful, in order to have a happy, harmonious, and auspicious existence. The fact that the wax hardens on contact with water to imprison other elements of the sort more corn and form one or other plates further strengthens the family unity which has been recovered after the loss of a loved one. Some people have fun interpreting, hopefully, the destination of the reincarnation of their deceased relative. Then sort more corn also marks the official religious end of the sequence of dead vigil, funeral, as well as that of sorrow, trouble, sadness. And the return of life of an impermanence was magnified by an auspicious prayer, and blessings are materialized by wax plates of the holy water. It can also restore body-mind harmony and strengthen the moral structure of the lineage. On the family and secular level is Basi, that serves as a landmark. Finally, the sharing of the vital essence of each member of the family community is intended to show the dead the oath of solidarity and the manifestation of the love of all its members of the family and the ancestors. See, the ancestral lineage. I've talked about this already before. Ancestral veneration, not worship, is very important in Lao culture and Vietnam and Thailand and many other places, as well as everyone's commitment to preserving and continuing the legacy left by those who have left. In the good process, the venerable can present their wishes of good health to the main members of the family by nodding ritual cords to their wrists, the auspicious prayer also serving as the call of wandering of souls, Basi. This is one of the only occasions where this ceremony of animist origin, but also which perfectly symbolizes the joie de vivre, and the Laotian conviviality is tinged with Buddhist colors. The openness and flexibility of Buddhism towards other religions or beliefs, whether pagan, indigenous, or aboriginal, as well as its ability to cope with new social situations, are at the root of its development since more than 2,500 years, as well as its success in the West today. The release of one's ai choi comes next, unless one of them wishes to extend his stay at the monastery. The ritual is exactly the same as in Lao land, a tribute to the triple jewel, asking for being free from one of the 10 precepts or 10 perfections, acceptance by the venerable monk, passage of religious clothing to the laity, request for the 5 precepts and their acceptance, and finally, prayer of recognition and homage to the Buddha, Sangha, and the Dhamma. Not Dharma, Dhamma. Dhamma is different. Depending on their schedule, some venerable can stay with the family for the Chakhal ceremonies, discussions, or personal talks. The household will then have dinner. Other visitors can also join their relatives, as the house will remain up to the outsiders in Laos, welcoming the community as a sign of kindness, the generosity of the departing person. It is also believed the more animated the household is, the more there is life and love around the bereaved family, the more serene and at peace will the spirits of the deceased, who can thus quietly continue its way in the samsara without having to worry about the living. So basically, the more harmonious the funeral and the procession and the energy behind the generosity, and the generosity behind, or the energy behind the generosity of the funeral, the more harmonious the transition will be. I just dropped coffee on my desk. Damn it. Let's see. The House of Party. Let's read some comments first. Nope, still the same. I've been feeling a little ill. That's why I haven't been on as much. I've been working like double shifts, but I've also been quite ill as well. So I've taken Fridays off in the next coming months. I've just taken Fridays off. I'm just not well. Unlike the practical Lao land, where the Chakal cannot be recognized until 3 days after the cremation to give time to the bones to cool down in the West, it is quite possible to recognize or to organize it in the next day or 2 days later, especially if it's a weekend. The ashes having been given to the family in the wake of the funeral ceremony. As in Laos, the ceremony takes place of the old Hunaadi and has become the Honabon, and brings together family, parents, friends, and acquaintances. It can, of course, take place in a pagoda if the vigil is organized there. The ritual of Chakal involves the same acts as a thanksgiving to a deceased person before his funeral, mainly tribute to the triple jewel request of the five priests. I've read all of that before. Before the takbag, this sounds like a repeat. At the request of the family, the venerable may grant an occasional tetsana to the assembly, or perform sort monghorn or sort lodnam, which then involves an additional act, the blessing with the lustral water of the people and the entire household by a venerable, who, aided by a bearer, will sprinkle droplets of this auspicious rain of the reborn life all parts of the home. Transfer, exchange, and sharing. A final act will mark the end of the Chakha ceremony. It is the Bang ritual, also called the Bang Sakong. A rite of transfer and exchange of redistribution, sharing of clothes and valuables such as jewelry had long belonged to the deceased, unlike the practice in Lao land, where it takes place at night, and in the pagoda, this ritual is organized and has taken place in Chakal and in broad daylight. Of all the belongings of a deceased are collected in suitcases, which will then be placed outside a family home as for a departure on a long journey. For Buddhists, death is above all the journey, a transmigration through the samsara to the final destination, nirvana, or the absence of everything, the void. Maybe that's the void. Could be the void. The suitcases are brought inside of the venerable, who will then ask the faithful to put on some money inside, each one to donate it to the monks. An act of purchase in disguise, and through them to the deceased. After them accepting, the monks will chant a prayer of blessing and transfer to the deceased, which is symbolized by Yadnam. Each member of the family who wishes to keep a memory will proceed to the ritual of Borsa, an exchange between the world of the living and that of the dead through monks, a way of redistributing wealth. According to Sonemani Nigole, a plate containing 5 pillars of candles and some flowers and a little money is raised to the level of the head by candidate for the procession of a garment, a bag, shoes, or jewels that belonged to a deceased. He will make a short prayer in silence and vows before handing the plate who presides over the ceremony. By accepting the ritual plate, the monk authorizes the applicant on behalf of the dead person to keep the affairs of the departing being. The recipient can choose between them in his or her everyday life to always feel in touch with the deceased parent or to keep them as relics which will carry goodness, bliss, or death to the household, as had been the life of the deceased. In the latter case, these affairs will be placed in the room and reserved for prayers and ancestors to be honored. Offerings and candles of flowers during Ansi days or precepts at the Pime Lao course. Throughout their existence, Lao Buddhists live in this harmony of opposites daily, praying or organizing ceremonies to help the souls of a dead person to reach nirvana, or at least have a few harmonious birth and full of happiness, while continuing to feed these same souls through the offering of meals and money to the monks, especially during the most important dates per Mai, religious or ceremonies or born or so on, through donations or associations or people in need. Some people even respect a ritual of sharing before each meal by reserving the first bite, rice, meat, fish, and so on to the invisible beings by depositing the symbolic meal in the garden, the court, or the forest. Come and share our meal and give us your protection and your blessing, would exclaim the person in charge of the ritual to the tutelary genius of Chao Tin Chao Tane and the third Bao Tavada. Rice its life. The belief in the existence of higher beings invisible and among us has always been pushed to the Lao Buddhists to collect food escaped from their hands and to throw them in the garden while begging a double excuse. Forgive us, geniuses, tutelary, to have forgotten you, for we know for sure that rice is the essence of life and our foster mother. Forgive us for throwing you away, and do not punish us by depriving us of food. In Buddhist and Lao cosmology, rice is beloved and respected goodness who has a soul and is entitled as for humans to karabasi, a typical ceremony of Lao culture and the art of being Lao. Therefore, she has the right to respect and consideration of humans, especially as us. Korhan Aisma, the consumption of rice cultivated in the ancestral fields, transforms the wives into sisters and the children into descendants. Rice is, of course, the main ingredient of the famous rice cake, Khao Thom, in Lao, and one of the most essential objects of a Bon or Buddhist ceremony in Lao land. Khao Thom is also composed of a banana and coconut milk. Khao Thom is composed of banana, which is the symbol of longevity, and coconut milk, the symbol of purity, spirituality, and a divine gift, according to Sonemani Nigole. Rice is the only vegetable that is supposed to have a soul like humans. That's interesting too. Very interesting. For Chai Chin Fun, rice is a life giver. I've already read something like this. Rice is a life giver and inseparable strength of life. Rice symbolizes survival and the sustenance and is therefore revered and glorified in many rice-producing countries. So the Malaysian academic on rice and in symbolic functions. A staging in Laos, Bang ritual takes place at night and is carried out by close relatives of the deceased who will go to the wat of the village and all that of the neighborhood if they live in town to drop the belongings with the name of the dead person written on them near the koti or dormitory of the monks. A person will ring the gong to indicate the presence of an unforeseen event before going to hide oneself with the other members of the delegation. 3 or more monks, sometimes accompanied by novices, will come from the koti to take away the objects they had found. They will perform a prayer of blessing and transfer of these goods to the recipient, while the family delegation, always hidden, also takes part in the ceremony with hands joined and praying that its dear dead would come to recover its own property. The delegation can immediately go to the bursa at the end of the prayers or wait until the next morning. In this case, they will bring along the morning meal to the monks. So Nemani Ngole believes that this staging is known to all the actors. The monks know for sure that the family members will come to file cases, but not claim to know where they come from. In fact, by hiding, the relatives of the dead do not try to fool the monks, but hope to see the dead coming back for his goods. A new illustration of the harmony of the opposites, the disappearance and the presence, the dead and the alive, the fear of ghosts and the desire to see loved ones and so on, are constantly being sought and are living by Lao nationals wherever they are. 100 days. The next step in the ritual of remembrance and the witness of gratitude and love for a deceased person is the 100 days ceremony. I can't read that. There is no written data about the significance of this 100-day figure at the time when it could have been practiced for the first time, becoming part of the rites and customs of Lao country. 2 tracks can be advanced based on the social and cultural presence of the people of Nachak La Nasang. That's an S in Lao. X is an S in Lao. La Nasang. The 100 number corresponds to approximately 3 months, and the number 3 has great importance in Buddhist cosmology as it corresponds to the triple jewel Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, and the perfect balance in all things. Every single life needs 3 basic aggregates to become a thinking being: the body, the mind, and the spirituality. The thinking being itself inflamed by the 3 fires, the fires of passion, or greed, hatred, and delusion, according to Buddha. So the 3 harmonies and then the 3 fires, the 3 disharmonies. The other probable significance of the 100 days, apart from their purely technical character, construction of that, construction of a budget, allowing family members living far away to organize their return trip back home and so forth, would be related to mimicry within the royal practices. The funeral of princes and kings generally takes place 3 months or later after their death. Given the extreme admiration and an almost mystical respect shown by the common people to crowned head, especially in developing countries, it would not be surprising if the latter could copy practices observed at the palace with the foolish hope of a princely renaissance for their departing parents. This transfer from a royal ritual to a popular practice is observed in weddings ritual. Finally, the family will hold an annual remembrance celebration to the anniversary of the death of their former parent. Each member of the family can decide to go to the pagoda by himself, wherever he or she has the opportunity to donate meals and consumption goods to the monks, so that the latter transfer them to the deceased while bringing bon or merits to the donors. This ritual must be observed for at least 3 years, because according to Confucius, a newborn takes 3 years to get out of the fold of his parents. Also, filial mourning is 3 days universally. If during the 3 days of mourning he perpetuates the principles of his father, he will have shown great filial piety, said the Chinese sage. Which last home? The entry of a relative's date of death into the family patrimony marks a fundamental step in the transformation of a deceased into an ancestor to whom it would be necessary to find an eternal home. If in Lao land the last name of a deceased person is naturally his native or that of his wife in the West, it is quite difficult, and it is a quite difficult and delicate problem to apprehend, and sometimes it may be a long and painful process for the living family, which is torn by two contrary forces, to bring back the loved one to his ancestral land on the one hand, and to assure him a permanent proximity with his descendants who have born and grown far away from the banks of the Mekong on the other. Ellen Oxfield rightly noted that in China, the home village of a man or woman is where is situated the home of his ancestors, which he owes forever obligations and respect. In France, especially in the Paris region, the trend is to install the urn containing the ashes in a family vault. The family often puts forward a technical and material reason to explain this choice. The whole family of the deceased in the West would be easier for them to take care of him or her, while encouraging the regularity of visits to the tomb. Other support a quite different but respectable option by pointing out that in the longer term, in 2 or more generations, people, for example, the descendants of the dead buried in the West would have no physical connection with their ancestral land and would no longer feel any carnal need to go to the land of their ancestors. Not entirely true. I disagree with some of this. Losing then all the roots to become a traveler without luggage, like the raven who wanted to become a peacock, would wander aimlessly without a social personality and cultural own. There would become simple numbers for social security and taxes, and would then be condemned to an endlessly search to know who they are, where they come from, where they are going. I believe they call that being deracinated. That's the deracination process. Well, this doesn't end this article. In Honolulu, some people have expressed the wish to be returned to Mother Torani or Fa Mai Torani or Jo Mai Torani for the Siamese. Venerate her too. Interesting. Jo Mai Tarani or Fa Mai Tarani or Mother Torani, or the earth goddess via the ocean. This practice recalls the dispersion of ashes in the Mekong has several advantages. Firstly, the material absence of a place of memory, a ta'at, a family vault or columbarium removes any obligation of maintenance and consequently releases the living parents from the little materialistic worries, while allowing the souls of the deceased to go their own way without having to worry about the world of the living. See, if I were to go, I would go one of 2 ways. If I were to be buried, this is how I would choose to be buried. And this is where Christians and Catholics and I butt heads in particular. I would love to be cremated, and I would love to be either put into a pot plant and re-garden so a tree can grow out of my remains, and I would usher in new life. And there would just be a plaque saying, this is the tree of the spirit of the person named Dennis who lived in this time period. But from the ashes, a new life of a tree would then grow out of my remains, and it would provide renewal to the earth goddess or Mai Torani. That would be one way I'd love to be buried. and cremated. The second way would be this ritual in the water. I would be put into a beach, or my ashes would be put into the water. I would be dispersed, and I would be walking along the spirit, or walking along the river or the beaches of the water spirits. That would be my way of going. Then in the family, so I very much agree with this ritual. I don't like the idea of being buried in a cemetery and then your soul being tied to the body is just stuck there through the bardo because you're wired around and you have like copper trapping your spirit. Then the family can practice ceremonies of remembrance and or transfer of merits or born in the pagodas and at any point of the earth or on the water. And finally, this is the most important aspect, but not yet symbolic, not yet understood by the Lao diaspora, the dispersion of ashes at sea symbolically reconstitutes a territory continuity. Since the waves of the Mekong flow into the South China Sea, before the mingling with those of the Pacific Ocean, Honolulu and Laos are somehow the only and same territory. In Buddhist cosmology, water is one of the fundamental elements with the earth. The air, the fire, the space, and the spirit of every human organism here, and even in the afterlife world. It accompanies, for instance, any ritual of transfer of merits to the dead, Yadnam, and the blessing consolation of the living, called Sword Lord Nam. She is the inescapable queen of the primary Lao celebrations. The festival to welcome the renewal of nature in the spring even bears the name of Water Festival in the Sipsong Pana region in southern Yunnan of China. And the most dreaded beings in Lao, Thai and Khmer mythology, the Nak or the Naga, and Nyuk can be improperly translated by water dragon, would live in the depths of caves and rapids, marking these places all the more feared and respected that the death occurs there has never found a satisfactory scientific or logical explanation. A glass of water is always offered in the preamble to any visit in our tradition. The Lao liquid water is thus used to loosen the tongue and refreshen the body and the spirit in the ambient humidity. Water is used to calm the malevolent intentions, to turn them into a more favorable and more cooperative arrangements, to make potential enemies potential friends, and perhaps even business partners or future family members, to be born, to live, and to die elsewhere. Like other communities from the former French Indochina hit by the geopolitical upheavals of the 1970s, in particular 1975, Lao nationals have been forced to exile to rebuild a new life made of unknown, of new and unexpected things, very far away from their native land, extraordinarily twinkling of fate that a century and a half later, after the death of Henry Maut, near Luang Prabang, millions of inhabitants from Anau Chak, La Nesang had been forced to settle and live and die in France, in England, and the United States, in Canada, and New Zealand. Forget everything, to start from scratch while trying to preserve their cultural roots, while their raison d'être, and to keep on hoping deep down in their soul to be able to return one day, and in one way or another, their ancestral land. The moon shines with an exceptional brilliance over the native village, rightly proclaimed an ancient verse from the time of Imperial China. And I always remember with great emotion and great pride the words of our youngest son born in France. So we better understand that the last wishes of some people who ask that their ashes to be repatriated to Lao land, where all their ancestors where are rooted their family history and their cultural identity, because they know for sure that this last trip back to their homeland has fundamental importance for the future of their lineage, their reincarnation. For the survival of this art is so beautiful and so rare to be allowed, since it's made of solidarity and communities of support, community support, with openness to the outside world and a kindness towards any stranger coming to visit their country and themselves, but also contains a huge true love. These people know, in fact, that their descendants will run the risk of losing everything by losing the desire to return to the ancestral land. Well, not in my case. There is not a day when I do not think about visiting Laos and helping those children dealing with those bomb scraps from those unexploded ordnance or the UXOs. There is not a day when I don't think about it. That has consumed my mind for like 10 years, if not longer now, in my 34 years of living. In my case, that is something I feel very heavily drawn to, as well as drawn to the castles of Esterhazy, of Austria and Hungary. In a globalized world, nothing is more normal than to be born, to live, and to die elsewhere than on the lands of one's ancestors. But every citizen of the world ardently and secretly longs for returning. Well, yeah, because it's part of the blood memory. I'm totally with Hyperborean knowledge and Rudolf Steiner on this, that the blood memory is not just physical, although it is carried into the literal blood, but it is so deep that it's cosmic. It is lineage based and it is cosmic. And when a lot of people tell me that the blood doesn't matter, like the perennialist, atheistic types, I hate to break it to you, that is just simply not true. Because if it were true, why would you feel drawn to your homeland? Likewise, why would I feel drawn to my homeland as an instinct? Not taught. I was not taught about my culture, lineage, or heritage. Yet I feel drawn to my own homeland. There is much more to this reality than we are taught. Lao nationals and Buddhists are not the only people who suffer from being far away from their ancestral land. The South African or Australian Bushmen who are forced to settle in cities or villages built by the authorities also die slowly and thus cut off from their homeland and the soil of their ancestors, especially since Guan Ajmer pointed out the consumption of rice cultivated in ancestral fields transforms the wives into sisters and the children into descendants. So the lineage is strong, basically. I'm not going to read this. I don't feel like I'm a monk and I'm qualified to read this. All conditions are evanescent. Their nature is to appear and to disappear. So it is life. All things living as they were, they appear, they all vanish, cease, and appearance and disappearance, disappear into that. RIP, by the way, to the person whose vigil is posted here. RIP, ma'am. RIP, Mrs. Anma. May the spirit of my Torani carry you safe into the afterlife. That's it. So what do you think of Lao death and funerary customs? I find that they're quite elaborate and that they are obviously something that has to be experienced and like I've stated a few times throughout that article reading, heavily tied to lineage, although not only tied to lineage, because you could be a relative of a Lao person as well, or like through marriage, maybe you marry into a Lao family, that happens. But I do find that it is very heavily tied to lineage and blood memory, and it's very heavily covered in the Occult Significance of Blood by Rudolf Steiner. Very interesting piece of work. You mean like cell memory? Well, yeah. Well, because in some occult circles, I can't cite who is who from the top of my head. I'm not as well read as like Hyperborean knowledge or Hidden America. Like I'm still learning. But what I will say is that there's also the water memory as well, and that the soul memory is carried on in through the water of the body, hence why there is resonance with you and other people, and those elements are not disconnected also from the blood because the blood also carries water. So a lot of the life, birth, death, and reincarnation and the lineages are very heavily tied through the blood, which is why things such as intermarriages are quite crucial, because you're intermarrying one cosmic lineage within another cosmic lineage, and then you inherit the karma from both parental lineages. And if there's bad parental karma here and good karma here, then, and let's say it's, especially if it's a mixed race, then the dilution with the ancestral memory can potentially dilute. It can potentially be diluted. And Rudolf Steiner's writings actually warn about this. So it's very interesting to boot and to note. With all that and said, Humanis Invictus, the human spirit is unconquered. Stay unconventional, stay creative, stay free thinking, and always remember that the human spirit is ad infinitum and it always will prevail.